Rev up your engines!
Now here seems to be a case of too much technology. Got an email from one of your viewers, and he says, I got a new 2021 Toyota CHR in July 2021. The heat doesn't work right. The car's been in a dealership 4 times in a 2-month period. They can't figure out why the heat doesn't work. They just say, oh, it's the nature of the beast. Those are their words. Hardly any heat, and when I don't, I can touch the hoses. Some of the hoses are warm, but some stay cold, even though the engine is warmed up. Once the heat reaches the air bleed plastic, there's no heat and the hoses are cold. Even after an hour of running, the temperature's too cold. The dealership changed the thermostat, but it didn't fix the problem. The air's been blown off, but it does not work. I can't believe they build a car like this that will not work correctly. Here's the thing. Technology sometimes is going too far, and in this particular one, you got a CHR, which has a very high thermal efficiency rating. I believe it's like 41%. And they have all these tricks to make the thermal system work efficiently. So you use more of the energy that the engine creates to drive the car and not waste heat that, of course, turns into making the coolant hot to get rid of the excess heat. Well, obviously, in your case, it's gone so far that you don't get enough heat to heat up the car. And he also said the temperature gauge will go real low, will go up. Obviously, there's too much technology involved here. The Toyota people say, oh, that's the nature of the beast. Well, obviously, there's a problem. You have a car that doesn't put out heat. Now it's October and you need heat. The engineers sometimes go a little bit too far here with technology to make it as efficient as possible. Then you don't have heat in the car and the car isn't running hot enough. They obviously don't know what's wrong. If I was Toyota, I would send an engineer down and look at this guy's car to see what's going on. It can't be the only one out there, right? And they said, we give up. It's the nature of the beast. The heaters don't work too well. Well, what a bunch of baloney that is, you know? Some cars now have 2, 3 different thermostats in them. Well, you got to still have a heater in your car in the winter. They ain't gone a little bit too far here where their own guys can't even figure out what's wrong. Let's get back to basics there. Making cars that work, that have heaters that work. Not just keep, oh, this is the most efficient car. But the heater doesn't work, so, I mean, it's really efficient now. It doesn't burn any gas because you can't drive it because you're freezing to death inside the car. So let's hope Toyota gets off their high horses and actually finds out why this guy's car isn't putting out heat and the temperature keeps going down even though they replaced the thermostat, which is all that they did. I mean, they didn't do much of an analysis of it. That's kind of obvious. They didn't fix it. They've had it 4 times. They obviously don't seem to care about it. Well, hey, Mr. Toyota, let's get out here, see what this guy's problem is, see why it's doing it. AS270 says, I have a parking grade argument. Please settle an argument between me and a friend. Does engaging your parking brake when you park anywhere flat or hill save your transmission for damage like the parking prong and whatnot? Well, yes, it does. When you put your car in park, there's parking prong goes in, holds it from rolling back. It'll be strained if you're on a big hill and you're just in park. Here is the best way to park your car. On flat, it really doesn't matter because it's not getting any strain, but any kind of an incline, especially a big hill, this is the best way to do it and you won't have any problems at all. What you do is, say you're on a hill, you parked. Okay, with your car in drive, still running, put your parking brake on. Then put the car in park and shut it off because then most of the strain will be on the parking brake holding it and it won't be on that pin because it does strain. The whole vehicle of your car is being held with that pin. You might as well use the brakes. That's what they're made for. That's why they call it a parking brake. Now, when I was a kid, they called it emergency brakes because cars weren't made that well and the brakes wouldn't work and you'd have to slam the emergency brake on an emergency to stop, right? But notice now they're called parking brakes. That's why they call parking brakes because you're supposed to use them when you're parking, especially on hills, any kind of an incline. It's a safety thing anyways, and it will keep your transmission from getting any kind of wear in it. Now, if you got a standard transmission, you put it in gear, so it doesn't really matter. You physically put it in gear. But even there, it's a good idea to put the brake on first, then put it in gear and turn it off in a standard, because then more strain will be on the brakes, which are made. That's why they're called parking brakes. Bonnie says, how long have your used Toyotas last? How old were used Toyotas when you bought them, and how many miles did they last? Well, I can't answer the question of some of those, because some of them, when I got rid of them, I sold them to people and they were driving them, and someone drove them away to other states. One guy even drove it to Canada and other countries, so I don't know what actually happened to them in the end. But I have bought Toyotas that were 20 years old, driving for another 10, and then sold them to somebody, and they're still running with 250,000 miles on them. They can last an awful long time if you buy the right vehicle. When it comes to Toyotas, I've never junked one. I just drove it, and then if I found a really nice deal on a newer one, then I'd buy it, and I'd sell the other one to one of my customers, and they're real happy to get $1,000, $2,000 Toyota that runs good that I took care of. So they can last an awful long time, really long time. But nothing beats my Celica deal. I paid $300 for that. It had 200,000 miles, and now it's got 240, and they're well made, and you can buy them cheap enough with real high mileage, and they might still last a really long time. Basically, $300 for a car is nothing, right? Even had good tires on it. When I bought it. The eel says, I got a 2002 Mustang GT. Is it normal for the intake air temperature sensor to be 104 degrees at idle and then drop 30 degrees when you drive above 30 miles an hour? Well, it is if it's hot outside, because your intake is the temperature of the air coming in. Under your hood is going to get hot because it's under the hood with the engine running. Once you get moving down the road, especially over 30, then the cool outside air is coming in. And especially if it's outside, I've seen many of them do that in Houston. If it was 100 degrees outside in July, of course, intake air temperature will be even higher under the hood. And then once you get going down the road, it comes down quite a bit. And that's relatively normal. The heat's inside your hood gets hotter, and that's the intake air temperature. But once you get rolling down the road, all the fresh air is sucked through the car, and you're also got the fan of the engine blowing a lot of the heat out. It will go. It's relatively normal for one of those things. Moves Via 1979 says, what could be causing my truck to counter steer when I'm taking a curve? 06 Ram. You obviously have something wrong in the suspension. You're going that way and it's trying to steer the other way. Always start with the obvious things. Check your tire pressure. If your tire pressure is off, that will do it. Any worn part will also do it. And the Rams are notorious for having ball joint problems, especially the lower ball joints. They'll often wear out. So check the lower ball joints. Jack it up, pull on it like this. The tires, if they clunk, clunk, clunk. If it's not that bad, it doesn't clunk, they can still be worn. So take it to a good mechanic like me. We know how to load test them. We jack them up and we load test them with pry bars. And then if we get motion, we'll know, well, the ball joint's starting to go out. It could easily be the ball joint starting to wear out. I see that on those all the time. Let's say you got a problem in your steering box. Sometimes it's the steering box. Keep trying to go the other way because it's worn and it has more assist to one side than the other. And so it'll keep trying to go to the side that has less resistance. But more often it's a worn ball joint, especially the lower ones on those trucks. Drago7 says, is it wise to unplug the oxygen sensor above the catalytic converter and spray with carburetor cleaner inside to clean the catalytic converter? I know I have to do it on a cold engine, but I'm afraid it'll explode. What do you think? Spraying a little carburetor cleaner in, take the oxygen sensor off in front of the cat and spray it, and you'll get some into the cat, right? It's not going to do all that much. Catalytic converters are honeycomb. They burn hydrocarbons, and if it's clogged up with stuff, that stuff is baked onto the catalytic converter. Spraying a little cleaner, it isn't going to do diddly squat. Now, this is kind of one of the nuttiest things on the planet, but I watched the guy do it once, and I tried it, and it actually worked. Now, it's a lot of work, but if you take a catalytic converter off a car, you can get a giant bucket, fill it with warm, soapy water. Throw the catalytic converter in that overnight. For some reason, that warm, soapy water sitting overnight actually can loosen a lot of the stuff, and then you can hose it off with a hose, and if you got a pressure wash the inside, and you got a lot of the stuff off, and it works over. It's the weirdest thing. Now, most people aren't going to go to the trouble of taking it all apart and cleaning it like that, but if you're cheap and you want to save money, you don't want to buy a cat, that actually does work. That will actually clean it. Now, if you do want to clean it, and you don't want to take it all apart, you can watch my video, How to Fix Bad Catalytic Converter, Scotty, and it'll show you can have a little lacquer thinner, like a gallon of lacquer thinner, and mix it with 10 gallons of gas in your gas tank and just drive it around, and over time that will actually physically clean it pretty good too. But sometimes the cats are so baked on, they're shot, and there's nothing you can do. You try cleaning them till hell freezes over, and it still won't clean them. You'd have to replace the cat. Oil burns on them, they're super hot, they bake on. But if it's not too bad, clean them either way. But a carburetor cleaner, you're kind of wasting your time. It's going to do much. Jaw423 says, I got a 2000 Avalon. My bulb out indicator light is on. I did have a bad license plate bulb, which I changed, but the indicator is still on. I also changed my headlights to LED. Did I do something wrong? The way that the warning light works is it's a ground fault interrupter system. When it sees a problem that it's not grounding to the bulbs, it puts that light on. You got a 22-year-old Avalon. Check the ground wires first. If the ground wires aren't perfect, it will put that stupid warning light, even though you don't have any bulbs that have gone bad. Realize one other thing. You did change the headlights to LEDs. That's an old car. It could be that the difference in the flow of the LEDs, which use much less power, is confusing the system and saying that there's lights out. So just for your own test purposes, take out your LED bulbs and put normal halogens in. And if the light goes out, well, you're either going to have to live with that light on if you want LEDs, or you're just going to leave the halogens in and the lights won't come on because it'd be a differential in the flow. It's measuring the flow of the system. So it could easily be that. But do check the grounds first, especially in the trunk, because they get wet and a lot of times the seals start to go and then the grounds go bad and get rusty. Check all the ground wires in the trunk, because it is a ground fault interrupter system. So if the grounds are weak, it can make those come out even though your bulbs are all still working. I've seen that many times. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.